Hello, and welcome to this
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
edition of the Purple Journal podcast. I am your unsurprised host, Joe Johnson, owner of purplePTSD.com. Person who's sick of that URL being correct all the time as well.
When Dalvin Cook went down, my dad, who was at the game, apparently was the first thing he said with his brother was like, "Yep, purple PTSD."
Hey, I guess.
Maybe it's time to change that name, Joe.
You know, I feel like the first thing I thought was he had a touchdown in the first half, and I was thinking the score's close for our prediction, and I also said that Cook would score 2 touchdowns. And so I was like, maybe I'll be right. Super right, like double right.
You totally would have been.
And I jinxed it. Yeah, so it's
How about changing it to purple sparkle ponies so everything's positive and happy?
Yeah, purple Super Bowl ring, and then that'll come true.
Yeah, I don't think I'm that lucky. The Sparkle Ponies thing. I think we might get some backlash from the My Little Pony people, and they're a fervent bunch. If you haven't come across the documentary about them, they like to.
Chris Kluwe, though, he named his book Sparkle Pony.
That's true.
And he's been a guest on our show.
And it shows how much I pay attention. Speaking of not paying attention, that's Joe Oberly.
Good evening.
Writer. How you doing?
Good.
You write for us. You also write for the Sports Post. I like to say that you're the guy with perspective on this show, so we need you, man. We need your words of wisdom.
I will try. It was a tough Sunday. Tough Sunday. And it all has to do with how closely you caught up to me in the challenge.
Y'all have no idea. You're legit tied right now.
Really?
Yes,
You're at 67 apiece. Yep.
Ooh.
I went and figured it out, and I said that's not good. No, it was a big turnaround, bad day. But it's when you saw him when you saw the ball come out so easily from this guy, that's when I knew. I mean, you couldn't see very well from the press box. He cut, and as soon as the ball comes out, you know that they've lost. Something happened, and they've lost all motor function in the rest of their body. And I know they put a helmet on it, but he would have hung on to it. It was just it's really too bad. And the person next to me said, "What was your favorite moment of the 2017 Vikings season?"
Ugh.
That one hurt. That one hurt.
And we'll get into the injury a bunch since that's big news. But yeah, I mean when he grabbed he jettisoned the ball to grab out of instinct. As he was falling, he went for the knee. That's how I knew it was. My he turned 60 this year. He used to get like I do, more angry, and now he's got this weird broken optimism going. And he kept saying it's fine. It's he just twisted it, and I'm like, yeah, non-contact injury. The ball goes flying out. This is the Vikings after all. That's 3 strikes, and it was what it was. But I don't know.
Then there's Luke.
I exist.
Technically. This is going to become a philosophy show. How do we know whether or not we exist? It'll be more entertaining than
Well, Nietzsche said that God is dead, so...
He did. That is correct. I didn't know that.
Bro.
But yeah, Luke writes for us still.
Yeah.
How you doing, man? How you hanging in there?
I'm doing okay. I'm going to sound a little gravelly and a little sickly because I caught a cold this weekend, but other than that, I'm hanging in there.
At least you didn't get tied by Joe. God, it's not all that bad.
That's insult to injury by definition.
A lot of season left. You guys were never really that far apart. This is a really swingy challenge.
Well, it'll be probably the highlight of the show. I don't know. I don't want to get super negative about things, but God, it feels so much like it did last year, doesn't it?
No.
Ooh.
No, it doesn't. I mean, the one thing they did do, it was, get some depth at this position. So, I mean, the roof hasn't fallen in, but it felt like it that day. But it's tough. Now you got to hope that Bradford comes back and picks up the slack of that passing game, because the running game is not going to be dynamic. You aren't going to have the defense so focused on a great running back. They're going to be able to play a little more straight up and focus on the receivers. So it really hurts the Vikings offense, which was on fire to this point. But I think they'll find a way to work through it and still put some points on the board. How's that for positivity, huh?
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot. If you want positivity, or if you want at least an explanation of the game that can kind of put everything into perspective as to why we lost and how it isn't, because the team is so bad. There's a lot of reasons that we lost. None of them are particularly sustainable. Listen to the latest episode of Norse Code, or I guess the game recap episode, because by the time you're listening to this, there might be a Bears preview episode out. But Arif Hassan does a great job of going over. The title of the episode is "In Some Games, Bad Things Happen," and sometimes things happen. The team made a lot of really good plays to get into, for example, position to make interceptions, and then they dropped them, and that sucks. But that's still the team making very good plays, and over the course of a season, those dropped interceptions are going to turn into actual interceptions, and then they're going to turn into interception touchdowns, and that all sort of evens out over the course of a season. So if I'm Mike Zimmer looking at that game tape and looking at those dropped interception plays, I'm happy with what I see. Because 90% of the play was good.
And last week you talked about the Lions saying that their record was unsustainable, similar to the Vikings last year. Winning a lot of games based on just luck or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, that's the number one thing I kept thinking during that game was they're doing it again, man.
Yeah, Matt Stafford was a disaster in that game. Eventually people are going to start catching these. I think the Falcons dropped 3, we dropped 4. Eventually they're going to start catching these unbelievably interceptable passes that Matt Stafford is throwing.
And, I don't feel down really about losing the game, or, I don't think that losing Cook is tantamount to losing Teddy or even AP last year. I just feel like, and I wrote this on Sunday night, it was an article about the Vikings as a concept, as a fan, and I just am sick of saying that, you know what, I can see us. I think we're still good enough to compete and win, and I think that we have a great defense. I think Latavius Murray will be fine, but I don't want to have to say that. You know what I mean? That's not really a take or anything that we can do about it. But it's just I don't want to feel later in the season when we get a wild card spot think how good we would have been had Cook not got hurt. You know what I mean? It's just I'm sick of it, man. I can't.
This stuff happens to every team. We just don't focus on their misery as much. Now, granted, the Vikings have had their share. I mean, you could write a book on what they've gone through, but talk to anybody that really covers the league, and they'll tell you what goes around comes around. This is bad, losing your starting quarterback and your starting, would be possible rookie of the year running back in the first quarter of the season. That's a heavy blow. There's no question about it.
And it did happen last year, I think, which is why it feels more like a curse.
Last year we were first or second in the league, depending on what injury metric you wanted to use, and the only other bad team was the Chargers, and they have it worse.
I think the difference is that the other teams take advantage eventually, or when the iron is hot. There's not every team has obviously won a Super Bowl, but a lot of teams have, and that's because they when they're unstoppable, they don't find amazing ways to win or to lose. And it just seems like, at least in my lifetime, we've had 5 opportunities to go to the Super Bowl, and we're favored in probably 4 of them. I don't know about 1988, but it just feels like, what's the point?
It's over? Is that what you're telling me?
No, it's just that's how I don't. I'm already kind of looking forward to next week, and I'm here, surprisingly. But
I think we
Sunday
should talk about injury luck.
Yeah, but emotionally, it's how it feels.
I mean, we need to talk about injury luck because I think people are, people are really, really lamenting the injuries because, the injuries were bad last year. And now, it appears that they're having this huge impact again, which they are. And people are saying like, well, what's wrong with the weights? Is it the blah, blah, blah? In total, this year we've actually had fewer, and in total we've had fewer injuries than most teams. I think if the field were injuring, a bunch of players, then you would see that. But we've only had 2 significant injuries this year. They just happen to the most important players, which is a matter of pure luck. It's not like, oh, well, your field is bad because it only injures quarterbacks. Like, that doesn't make any sense. So I think we need to, back off with the turf or the field or whatever. These things just happen. And some teams, they lose a safety or a cornerback to their ACL. Every team gets injuries, but they don't get injuries to the most important players immediately, I think is the lesson we learned here.
Last week they were pulling, or not last week, or whenever the Bucs game was, they were pulling Buccaneers off the field like flies, and they came in hurt. So, I mean, it ultimately you have to have depth on your team to sustain your season. Bud Grant said it a long time ago. The greatest quality of a player is not his ability, but his durability. Can he show up and play at the level that you need him to? And injuries happen in this league. They're just going to happen. They happen a lot, and they're going to continue to happen. And last year was kind of an anomaly. This year is tough in a different way. I mean, I sit here and think, why doesn't Aaron Rodgers ever get a season-ending injury? Probably because he's got an offensive line that protects him like crazy, and they've had some luck. They did lose their best receiver last year, and it hurt them. Was that 2 years ago when they lost Jordy Nelson? That hurt them. So it all depends on what it is. You've got to have depth to get through it, and I'm feeling at least at this position there is some depth. Last year they ran out of it on the offensive line, and that was just a dumpster fire as the season went on, and 5-0 season turns into 8-8. So it's hopefully it's not going to be that bad this year. Hopefully the defense stays healthy because they are a very tough unit, and they're going to have the team in games all year. And hopefully with this passing game, it'll make up for what we don't have without Cook, but we still have with what they've got remaining.
Which is plenty.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is, but that, to me, that just in my head harkens back to, I just know I'm going to be thinking that later in the year. Think how awesome we would have been with Cook, and look at next year is going to be sweet because Cook will be back. It's just, my point is can't we just win once, and then we can just get rid of the show, the website? If we win one Super Bowl, that's it. I'm moving to Hawaii, living off the
shutting
land.
down the website.
That's all I want.
That's why you got to build your teams for the long run to be in there year after year after year. You got to find yourself
exactly. That's why it's tough to build a team to okay, we're going to contend in 2018 because 2018 comes around and your quarterback goes down with a non-contact injury. You can't put all your eggs in that basket. That's why you have to build long sustaining teams so that when this thing happens, you can come back next year and compete. That's a really good reason to kind of establish a philosophy of longevity instead of something like in 1998 or 2019.
You have to start feeling for Zimmer at some point, though, where he's got to be thinking, what did I do?
Yeah, what Indian grave did he piss on?
Totally, with the defense that they re-signed a lot of the core players with this offseason, that's, I feel like one of those opportunities where it's going to feel like looking back that we had this great defense and nothing ever happened for whatever reason. But
just like AP.
Yeah,
yep,
totally.
or Moss. Randy Moss, or the Purple People Eaters, or any of them.
Gary Quazzo.
It is very hard to win, except if you're the New England Patriots for some damn reason. But yeah, it's hard to sustain it year after year. And you look at how many teams that have reached the Super Bowl, either win or lose, and they fall off the face of the earth next year because they extend themselves to such a degree to get there that they kind of they kind of, don't have that same edge. It's really difficult, and you have to have some luck. Like Luke said earlier, have some injury luck. That's a huge part of it. And, Vikings have not had it of late. It's unfortunate, but I don't think that they're as in dire straits yet as they were last year. What happens if Cook plays for 3 more games and then gets a season-ending injury? It's not any, is it the same thing? I mean, I don't know. It's too bad. I was really looking forward to watching him this year. I thought he was just coming into his play. I mean, he was just, getting better and better each game. And even that run that he had, when he heard him.
Yeah, it was a good run. It looked almost like he was going to break that one up for a touchdown.
Exactly. God, and that's what tears me up, especially you hate for a kid in his first year of this to happen to him. You hope it doesn't affect him mentally, that he has the same kind of internal, fortitude to get back from this injury like Peterson did. I mean, that because he is the real deal, and he is the future of this team. And want him back next year, just going great guns. And so.
I thought about that when they were showing it on the replay, because basically he was doing what he is elite at, which is just cutting while running basically full speed, and for whatever reason his knee just didn't take it, or it got caught in the turf a weird way. But when it comes to his future and guys coming back from injury and being tentative and stuff like that, like you mentioned, Joe, I just worried about next year him, not so much him, but how, just as a person thinking, like, if it can happen in that random of a situation, these guys have to not necessarily live in perpetual fear, but it's no wonder that they all, obviously support one another on either team when they go down, because it's just kind of a Russian roulette.
Yeah.
It's kind of, I don't know, scary.
I'll tell you, I wondered, just watching him in the 3 games that got to watch, or the 4 games got to watch him this year. I said to someone next to me in the press box, I said, God, this guy, he loves to run up the middle and grind out his yards up there, but I can't believe he enjoys getting hit as much as he does. And there's just this nagging feeling in the back of my head that at some point he's going to get hurt. But here he gets hurt on a non-contact play. What are the odds of that? So.
Yeah, whatever happened to, sprained ankle out 3 weeks? Why are all of these, devastating non-contact, maybe his career is over injuries?
Mm-hmm. It's a good question.
I wonder if there's any truth behind what people are saying about the field. I know what it made me think of was, I think the NFL Players Association released a thing to the players saying when you go to the Patriots Stadium to wear a certain type of cleats, because their field is really soft, and it's within the regular realm, but it's just way too soft. And that made me kind of think of whether or not these new rubber ball infused fields are more conducive with more catastrophic injuries than minor ones. But
I don't think there's any correlation. I think they've studied it pretty well, and I think it's actually less than natural turf.
And that's what was on the floor of the Metrodome too, right? In the same events eventually. But you start wondering. I mean, I was writing something about another's, because one of the Lions got hurt before the Vikings ever did, and I was going to mention how many people have been carried off this field so far this year, and I was going to say I'm just happy it's not Vikings, and then I didn't finish it. And so if you can blame me, I jinxed Dalvin Cook's injury. I'll take it on.
Well, that's on the agenda. Blame Joe, it says. But what do you guys think about Latavius Murray? Obviously, he's a different kind of back. A lot of people thought, after we picked him up, that he was the replacement for AP. He's a bigger guy. That if people needed an example of the different kind of back he was, that screen pass of him on the sideline trying to turn and tiptoe his way in, it made me laugh, just because he's I saw someone describe it as the Titanic turning. But I mean, you guys have alluded to it a little bit, that the team's not screwed without Cook. But what do you guys think about Murray, and how do you think that might change the offense in regards to play calling?
Go ahead.
I think he does a lot less than Dalvin Cook made the run blocking look better than it was. I think we're going to suddenly be like, what happened to the run blocking? I thought the offensive line was playing well.
Yeah,
they were atrocious for a long time, and Dalvin Cook did a lot of, turn a -5 run into a +2 forgettable run. Latavius Murray doesn't do that. I don't think he hits holes quite with the acceleration and authority that he needs to, and I don't think his vision is as good as Dalvin was. That said, I mean, he's not Asiata levels of bad. He'll be able to, if the offensive line can give him a hole, he'll be able to run the ball through it just as bad as well as anybody, but you can definitely expect a success rate to take a big dive. And I'm worried about the impact of losing Dalvin Cook. I think he was doing a lot for the team, and I mean, I had just written a huge article about how much Dalvin Cook was doing for the rest of the team.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, you talk, he made mention this week that his ankle is not 100%, and so it's going to take a while for that to be. But he was the guy that they thought was going to replace Adrian Peterson, like you said, Joe, and we had no idea at that time that the Vikings were going to draft Cook. So he was supposed to be the guy then. So hopefully he can. I think he's the kind of guy that wants to, take over and really, make a difference. Obviously there's talent levels a difference, but I don't know, maybe with him and McKinnon, they do some different things and get him the ball and space if they can. And I think, I'm hopeful. I'm not going to say he's Dalvin Cook. There's no way. You can't replace a kid like that. But I don't think the kitchen is bare. I think there's something there and something they can do. I mean, it's going to be a different style. He's going to get his hard yards with power rather than, quick cutting and finesse and power. It's just going to be a little more Matt Asiata like, but it is what it is.
And I know he was, if I recall correctly, back when we got him, they said he was like an elite blocking running back, which is, woohoo. But he does all right catching out of the backfield too. I mean, do you think that they're gonna really move away from that now that Cook's gone, or just use Jet more often?
I think they'll throw him out of the backfield, but they'll have him in there. That's the thing. And if they can, at least have the threat of him to catch a pass out of the backfield, they can have him in there for that or pass protection, and to keep the passing game going, which has been going really well with no matter who's throwing the ball to him. So I don't think they'll go away from it too much. They'll still use him, not as much, but to think about it, Cook dropped a number of passes in the 4 games so far. I think it's 4, maybe 5 of them, at least one a game anyway. And so he wasn't. That wasn't so far. Didn't look like his forte. But I think having him in there for him or Jet in there, it has the threat of throwing to the backfield, and it just gives him some options.
Yeah, you're not going to have predictable sets like you did last year with like the way they used Matt Asiata and Jerick McKinnon.
Right.
They'll probably rely on the passing game more just in general on first downs, because they won't have as much faith. I don't think they'll have as much faith in being able to get
chunk yardage on first down?
Yeah, or even just successful plays, just being able to stay ahead of the chains. So, the Vikings, even in 2016 with that offense, were actually excellent at passing the ball on first down and being successful. So I think they'll be able to do that as well. And you can really do that with either Latavius Murray or Jerick McKinnon, and both of them can run of similar levels. So I think they're just, they're not the same back, but they're backs you can use for all the same purposes, which is really, really, really nice.
Jet's going to have to play a little bit better than he did last Sunday, though. He had a tough game.
Yeah.
Well, what we're talking about is could end up all being for naught, because there's these really sweet hypothetical trades going on social media and in Vikings zeitgeist, if you haven't heard of them yet. But essentially it's that the Vikings could give up a 4th round pick for Adrian Peterson and bring him back into purple and gold. We should just end the show there with no explanation.
I really want to clip that laugh and like use it.
Oh yeah, we need a soundboard, and that's
got to be in there.
Big time. Just like the intro of the show is going to be on the soundboard since it'll be relevant. But yeah, I put it on the agenda thinking like I can already hear you guys, your opinions on it, but I wanted to hear what you guys thought about this AP.
Take it away, Joe. I refuse to have thoughts on this.
Nonsense.
When I saw it all happening, right after the game, and by the time I got home, I looked up and it wasn't very soon, and then it was on Purple PTSD. AJ wrote it, and I'm just going, no, this don't. Listening to the call-in show on the way home, I mean, they were poo-pooing it. It's just, there was some national media like Luke and Sitter off the podcast that they were. I'm sorry, just a minute. The Los Lynx are the WNBA champions.
Yay, I'm watching it.
And I just there's the reason I don't even entertain it because the Vikings won't ever entertain it. That's all it is for me. I mean, there's a million reasons not to do it, but they would never do it. They did not offer the man a contract for a reason, and they're not going to give him up for nothing and then pay somebody to get him back. And
they could have gotten him back even after he left.
Pardon me?
Well, nobody really wanted him after he left anyway, so they could have probably
he was only
signed
offered
him to
time. He was only offered.
The Saints arguably don't still want him.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty much over, for him, and it's certainly not coming back to. There's no way that would happen.
I think people, and maybe part of that is my fault since I've been so doomy and gloomy, but I feel like the reaction, people feel like Dalvin Cook's injury is tantamount to Teddy's injury last year, and we need to make some sort of move externally because there's no internal solution. But they're definitely, the initial reaction is...
They're going to go with Latavius, and it's going to be a little worse, and then that'll have to just be fine.
He's a Pro Bowl running back. I mean, I don't know why people seem to...
Because he's not very good, and his Pro Bowls are an illusion.
Based on volume?
Pro Bowl voting is based on just whimsical garbage. But
he's that quote unquote Pro Bowl season.
That season. I mean, he was fine. He wasn't. Oakland set him up very well. He was schemed. Like they schemed very favorably for him in a way that I don't think Minnesota is capable of. Not because of anybody's talent, just the scheme just doesn't work quite as well for him, and they won't open up the holes for him. He's just sort of a combine stud that never really blossomed into he's not Devonta Freeman, he's not Kareem Hunt, he'll be the guy he is, and that's just gonna have to be mediocre, and that'll have to be fine.
And that'll be fine, hopefully, because Bradford will be back throwing to Cook, Thielen and Diggs, and I almost put this on the agenda last week just because they were second and third in the league in receiving yards, but it was an early season. But Luke, you wrote an article just yesterday about Diggs and Thielen and whether or not they're the best wide receiving duo in the league, and kind of just wanted to get your thoughts on both of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so wide receivers are tough to evaluate with total yards because there's a bunch of mitigating factors. Some offenses pass more, some offenses run more. It doesn't. It's hard to say. Well, is this guy the best receiver if Blake Bortles is throwing to him or Brian Hoyer's? It's kind of hard to parse that by just looking at yards, because you can say, well, this guy has more yards than this guy, but that guy had Tom Brady thrown to him. So there's a lot of better metrics out there that can measure wide receiver play, isolate it from the quarterback, isolate it from the guys that you can look at the corners that they went up against and how they did against the Vikings versus how they did in other games. And this article has all of that information, but in basically all of these categories, these kind of advanced analytics that are designed to be accurate and predictive measures of wide receivers play that correlate well to wins and they correlate well to future performance. Diggs is number one in like all of them. He's ahead of Julio Jones. He's ahead of Antonio Brown. He's ahead of Brandon Cooks and Chris Hogan, and he's ahead of everybody. And he's like blowing the field away in some cases. So like there's a really, really good argument to be made that at this kind of quarter mark of the season, Stephon Diggs is the best wide receiver in football, and Adam Thielen is like top 10 and everything. So no other duo comes close to that except maybe the Patriots wide receivers, but there's a lot more mouths to feed over there. So the volume isn't there for them, and they also kind of have so for that reason they have mediocre yards per route run stats, and they also have, I would venture a guess that Tom Brady's a little better than Case Keenum.
I read the article, I really liked it, and I wanted to say to you, Luke, I mean, you put in there about, of course, there's some factors that can't be accounted for, like your competition, and would you say as well that you cannot it's not a total level playing field when you're going comparing this, and of course no statistic ever is, because ultimately
right, that's why there's a bunch of them. The idea that it's not a level playing field is kind of what these stats are for. They're meant to adjust away stuff like, if you didn't have a good quarterback throwing to you, you can look at wide receiver rating or like passer rating when targeted and compare that to other people. And that's sort of in a way like adjusts away some of the quarterback play, or yards per route run adjusts away some of the quarterback play, because you just get or things like targets, stats that use targets adjust away the quarterback play, because it really like reflects on you well if you're getting open and getting targeted, and then if the pass was incomplete, it doesn't punish you.
The one thing I had thought about that would maybe I wanted to ask you about, is it worth? You talk about targets, and sometimes when you put it against running a route in total. I mean, if you ran a route, you're comparing it to that, but sometimes you're specifically running a route as a decoy too. And it's very rare when you're going to have the ball even targeted to you. Can you allow for that? Does that make any sense?
That does make sense. And if somebody's being used as a decoy, I would argue that a low score is deserved, because the team doesn't want to target them. They just want to use them as a decoy. Like if you're having Laquan Treadwell run a 9 route because you don't want to target him, like that, I think, and that would reflect poorly on him in the stat. And I do think that that's proper.
Mm-hmm.
Randy ratio.
I also like the fact that both of these receivers have made catches on passes that weren't exactly,
perfect.
They've been unbelievable accuracy erasers.
Yes.
They've been making Case Keenum look a lot better than he is.
Right. Even Bradford. I mean, even the first game, I know Thielen made some catches that were just at the top of his catching radius that were not well thrown, but they were close enough, at least for him. So that's that's to these two guys' credit that they've done that.
And what is Diggs specifically do so well? I know that he's lauded as like an amazing route runner, and he's a lot faster than I think people give him credit for, at least top end speed, because he made the list of like the top 5 fastest.
People think because he's short he's a slot receiver, but he really isn't.
Yeah.
He does everything well. He's a great route runner, and he's great at getting separation. He's won contested catches really well this year, which was not something he was that good at earlier in his career. He actually struggled a lot with that earlier in his career and has improved greatly, which I actually think we need to mention the wide receivers coach, and his name is escaping me right now. But he also has a much bigger catch radius than you would expect for somebody of his height. Yeah. He plays like he's 6'4", and he's not 6'4", but he plays.
He also struggled with getting open, getting off the line and getting open early in his career.
He struggled against press, and that seems to be nothing. Darrell Hazel, who's I think deserves a ton of credit for this kind of resurgence in these two players. And I wonder what'll happen now when we get Floyd in.
Yeah. That'll be interesting.
I think it'll be the same thing as what's happening to Treadwell and Rudolph. It'll just be like, other people get open sometimes, but Diggs and Thielen are like balling, so whatever.
And Treadwell almost had that. He went up for that deeper ball, but they said he mistimed his jump.
Yeah,
which is
there
kind
was
of his
one.
bread and butter.
There was one where he maybe jumped a little. Or is the one where he should have got a flag? He was like horribly interfered with.
I don't think it was that one. I think it was the one where.
Was it the one in the end zone?
No, this was like at the 50-yard line or so, and the safety came up over the back and almost picked that off. They both kind of caught it at the same time. But
I don't remember that.
Either way, I maybe feel for the guy because he's only getting limited opportunities playing behind those guys, but it is good to see that. I've read a lot of stuff comparing the way that Diggs plays to the way that Antonio Brown plays, and I think they're similar physically, and they're just great on all three levels.
Antonio Brown has the same kind of he's not tall enough to be playing as big as he is, but he is playing as big as he is.
And they're both like 4'5" guys. They're not like super quick, but yeah, I guess Diggs is just student of the game, man. So got to look forward to his minimum of missing 2 games a season coming up.
They're getting open. That's why he's throwing to them. They're getting open. What's going to happen to Treadwell, since you brought him up, when Michael Floyd makes the game day roster on Monday night?
I actually think Treadwell's still going to outsnap him. I don't think Floyd showed much in the preseason, and I think they still like Treadwell better.
Really? They didn't. From what I saw at training camp, I thought this guy was heads above a lot of what was going.
Yeah, Floyd had the training camp, but in the preseason play, which I think they put more stock into, which may or may not be correct, but they do for better or worse, they do. Floyd didn't really do much. He was unable to get separation. He was unable to win contested catches. He didn't really look like he offered anything more than Treadwell.
Yeah. Do you think he got much of an opportunity in the preseason because they weren't planning to go with him? I didn't think he played a whole lot, and I know he didn't play with.
He played against the twos, but he couldn't get separation against the twos, which is kind of concerning in and of itself.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, I'm just amazed he's not had another incident with this month off, so I'll take that, I guess.
I suppose.
Got to aim low.
He's going for non-alcoholic kombucha tea.
He should market that.
Should.
Can I mention something about the Lions game before we move on?
Yeah, I was going to segue into the Lions game, so if you want to take it.
Yeah, I think we need to... It's just unbelievable how bad the luck was in this game. 4 fumbles, all recovered by the Lions. Fumble recoveries, for as much as they've been studied, are almost entirely luck. There is, it's impossible to be consistently good at recovering fumbles, and the ball is funny shaped. It bounces weird ways. And so 4 fumbles, all recovered by the Lions, and 4 interceptions, all dropped. All of those things are relatively subject to variance. I mean, obviously you want your cornerbacks to be able to catch the ball better, but, we also consider ourselves lucky to get those opportunities. I just think that we should understand that the team can play that well and win more games than they lose.
Yeah, I definitely felt like they gave them that game, or that the Lions didn't earn it in any way. I know in the NFL you have to be happy with every win that you get, and they're tied for the division, but the Lions can't feel that great about how that game went for them.
No, they should be worried. Although, you can't say that, they didn't earn it or whatever, because, ultimately we had all kinds of our own problems, and the Wildcat fumble and
I was gonna
inaccurate passes downfield that ended drives and stuff like that.
I felt like
Case Keenum was a disaster.
When Spielman's brother was ripping on that wild card play, he was kind of yelling a little bit, saying, "You're moving the ball. Why would you get fancy for no reason?" And it harkened back to Luke's comments on the offensive coordinator, Shermer, and saying that he does well when he has to adapt, but when he tries to go into his own little playbook or state of what he thinks the offense should be in a perfect world, that things go kind of sideways. And well, it's not hard to see why they would do a direct snap to a former quarterback. It still kind of reminded me of that situation. But I'm a huge I've always hated Wildcat. I don't
Yeah, I don't hate the idea of the Wildcat because I think it was like it was really successful last year, and I don't mind it being a part of the playbook. I don't mind dialing up the Wildcat. I agree the timing was not great, and I have a theory as to why, and I hate this, but I learned on a recent the Pocket Protectors podcast, the other podcast that I do, that often offensive coordinators will come in with scripted plays. And they will not deviate from that, even when the situation, they will have, the next 5 plays kind of thought out, and they'll say, okay, we're going to do a pass here, and then we're going to do a toss run, and then we're going to do a zone run, and then a stick pat, or whatever. And the Wildcat is one of those, and they're not going to sit there and go, well, the Wildcat's up next, but maybe we don't need to do it because we're moving the ball well already. No, it's part of the script, and they just go with it, which I hate, but apparently that is pretty much standard practice for everything.
Yeah, I always thought they scripted the first drive, but beyond that,
I think they script more. I learned that they scripted more than I thought, and they are very unwilling to deviate from that, even if game situation calls for you to not be fancy, which I hate. So I don't mind the idea of the Wildcat being a part of that scripted play thing. But I really, really wish that teams, and this isn't just the Vikings. The Vikings, I would imagine that 30 out of 32 teams do this. But I just wish that you could kind of look at the situation and have that thought of, okay, we're moving the ball well. We don't need the Wildcat right now. Let's do this later. I don't even think that's a consideration for many offensive coordinators in the league. I don't even think that's a thought that pops into their head.
To not do it?
Right, to rethink your scripted plays based on game situations.
If, for example...
Which just makes no sense to me.
This is the most extreme example, but if they were handing the ball off up the middle and it was getting 10 yards every time, you think they would just keep doing it?
Sure. Think of it like on 2nd and 14. They'll run the ball because that was the next play up. Even though running the ball on 2nd and 14 is a really bad idea, based on success rate, you need that play to be 7 or 8 yards to be successful and to actually be a worthwhile use of second down.
You think that they would more have and I know they do this in some way, but okay, we practice 10 different plays for
Correct.
2nd and long, and this is one of those plays. You know what I mean?
Well, they practice a certain amount of games for each week. I mean, they have they set up their game plan, and they have a certain number from their huge lock box of plays, and I think they work on those. So they're not going to go outside that too much if their players.
Yeah, there's a limit to what you have to work with.
Yeah. Yeah. So and the other thing is too, you always hear about these halftime adjustments, and all that. So you'd think they would be able to make adjustments on the fly if they're making them at half, but it's obviously more involved than that. But even then, I've heard Zimmer poo-poo them. We didn't adjust. We don't make those. Well, I don't know. See, I got it. Just off of going off of Luke's Renegade podcast, the Pocket Protectors podcast. I think we should change the name to this one to the Purple Pass Protectors podcast. What do you think, huh? No?
Well, then we would definitely suck.
What about the Despondently Destitute podcast? Wasn't that the last name?
Something like that.
The Derelict Dirtbag podcast. Any other thoughts on the Lions game? The defense obviously played well.
I'm just thinking about an image of these guys with pocket protectors seen as renegades. But I'm sorry. Anyway, go ahead, Joe. Excuse me.
It takes a lot of self-confidence to wear a pocket protector.
It does.
Rocketeer 83.
You've got to be comfortable in your pocket protector.
Your own nerdy ass skin.
That's right. There it is. That game was so winnable for the Vikings. It was the defense played more than well enough to win. They had they flushed them in the past game, and they had trouble stopping. They had trouble tackling. What's his name?
Abdullah. Yeah,
because
he's very good.
You all of a sudden saw how good he is. I mean, for 2 years he's been injured, and you just thought he was. Everybody's drafting him in his rookie year in fantasy football because they thought it's going to be great. Myself included, and And oh my goodness. And all of a sudden, this is what he is. And he has got some jitter to him. There's no two ways about it. So they had trouble. I was counting missed tackles for a long time. And, so they didn't, they did the bend, don't break. But after you give them the ball 2 times on the carpet in the first 2 drives in the second half and they expect your defense to come out and stop both of them, it's just asking too much. They got 1 touchdown, and it's just a shame that that's all they needed to beat the Vikings. It's such a frustrating loss on top of the loss of Cook. So it was a bummer. But the Lions are a pretty decent team, and the Vikings still are too. They should have somehow found a way to win that one. That's going to come back to bite them.
It really sucks.
I saw, Luke, a tweet from you, I think, with a few minutes left in the game, and you said something like if Teddy or Bridgewater...
Oh, yeah, both Teddy and Sam win that
yeah.
game. Case Keenum was a catastrophe. We haven't talked about him much. He threw a lot of inaccurate passes. He had some great, pocket scrambles, which look awesome kind of to the naked eye in a live viewing, but a lot of those scrambles were necessitated by pressure that he caused. The pass protection was pretty good in my opinion, and I think a lot of the pressures that came were because of Case Keenum either holding the ball too long or scrambling into pressure when he previously had a clean pocket.
A perfect example of that is...
Yeah, or misreading the protection.
Well, from what I understood, the third and goal, he called off the protection and then forgot that he had done it.
He read a zone blitz. And when there's a zone blitz, I think it was a zone blitz is what he read. Usually a defensive lineman will drop into coverage for a zone blitz in an attempt to stymie quick passes. So he read zone blitz and thought that defensive lineman was going to drop into coverage and therefore slid the protection away from it. It's a misread and a mistake, and he shouldn't do that. But that wasn't a miscommunication on the offensive line like it initially looked like, and I think the broadcast even said that.
And I thought about the high variance thing you talked about last week and how, he either plays really well or pretty terribly, and how that works for a backup quarterback because, if they're going to lose a game anyway, why not lose big? But I thought about that in that moment, thinking that, if we had even a mediocre quarterback in this situation, this game would probably be a little bit different. But not to get back into topics from last week, it seemed like such a winnable game, and in this division it's going to be really tight. So it feels a lot like the games did last year against the Lions, where I went away thinking,
frustrating.
Why didn't we win that game? And I remember that pretty much both times last year. So we're
on a 3-game losing streak against the freaking Lions. And all 3 of them games where we could have won it down the stretch.
Well, now we just got to win on the road late in the season when the rest of the injuries are piling up. Speaking of which, we face the Bears next Monday, another national game.
Nationally televised game.
Yeah, that's...
Stop the run, baby. Stop the run. Stop the run. That's all you have to do. Well,
it's going to be really hard.
Yeah. But, the Vikings are one of the better run defenses in the league so far this year, statistically. But
even with all the missed tackles, they still stymied the run very well against the Lions.
Yeah, they didn't give up a 100-yard rusher, and that's a Lions, embarrassment on there.
They didn't?
No.
I thought they did.
I heard Abdul only had 94.
Yes.
You gotta be kidding me.
Yeah. I don't know how he didn't get it. It seemed like he, especially early, was destined to get it, but yeah, that's a victory. And they got their rookie was announced to start next week. Then they're giving up on the Mike Glennon project.
Yep, and that's kind of a double trouble. Well, it's trouble for the Vikings in the fact that they're getting a rookie in his NFL debut, so you got to get the front 7 after him and really making him put his head on a swivel because. The Vikings don't have a lot of, film on him. He played well in the preseason, did well, but I don't know if, how much you can count on that. So there's nothing to look at. But and he's probably, it's funny to say this. I mean, maybe this will be Luke's prediction later, but this guy's going to probably have less he's a rookie and he'll have less turnovers than Mike Glennon did, who has had 10, or at least the offense had 10 in the first 4 games, which is incredible.
$14 million man.
Yeah, exactly. So,
yeah, yikes.
I wrote a story for the Sports Post about how do you figure the Bears? I mean, they play two games tough at home against both the Atlanta Falcons, took them right down to the wire, and then they beat the Steelers there. So they're going to be tough at home, and strange stuff happens always to the Vikings down in Soldier Field, and especially when they play on Halloween. It's not a Halloween game, but it's down in Soldier Field. They don't always do well down there. So I'm looking for them to hopefully turn this trend around, because the Bears are not that good of a team. Their defense is better. Their defense is actually pretty good against the run, and not as good against the pass. But the Vikings are going to have to get the offense going and throw that ball all over. They'll be throwing all over the place, and the Bears will be running all over the place, I think. So it looks like.
I think the Bears are probably going to try to make it as easy as possible for their rookie quarterback in his first game. You don't generally see teams coming out and taking the game plan with the first rookie quarterback start, making the game plan extremely difficult or complicated. So you'll see a lot of kind of single read or double read plays. You'll see a lot of Tariq Cohen and Jordan Howard. And I think they're going to try to beat the Vikings with Tariq Cohen and Jordan Howard, which isn't a very bad plan because they're incredibly talented players. The interior line of the Bears is very good. It'll be a really good matchup with guys like Cody Whitehair against Linval Joseph. And then, the ability to kind of swing them out and get them passes in the flat and hope that the tackling woes from last week continue. I think that this will be a big game for Trey Waynes, who's been phenomenal in the flat at tackling. A lot of receptions allowed. The coverage stuff is still a problem, but he's been absolutely amazing, kind of limiting yards after the catch and tackling swing passes in the flat for losses. So that I think that's how you slow that down. And then on the defensive side, I actually don't know much about the Bears on defense. I know that their defensive line is very good, so obviously you're going to need to get time for. It sounds like Sam Bradford is practicing, but I'm still going to default to Case until I'm told otherwise.
I all but said it in my preview that I thought it was going to be Bradford just because of what the tea leaves. But they haven't had a media session on the Bears game this week. I mean, Zimmer talked to the media on Monday, and then there's been 2 days of no media access. So I'm going out there tomorrow, I'm hoping to see a little bit of Bradford out there doing something, because I think it's going to be even further on to the front burner with him with the loss of Cook. You're going to want somebody who really and the thing is, he's going to be rusty. Unfortunately, he's had that great game, his opening game, and he wanted to build off that, and he's been sitting nursing his knee for 3 weeks. So either way, it's going to be a tough game. But like you said, they're tougher against the run, but they're like 15th, ranked 15th in yards against the pass. But the defense gives up a lot of points. They're ranked 27th. I shouldn't say it's all in the defense because there's a pick six in there at least, but defense is ranked 27th. They give 26.0 points a game so far. So
defense?
No,
I was gonna say what?
There. So you can score on them, but they don't give up a lot of yards. So pretty highly in that regard. It'll be tough. Yeah, I agree with Luke. That's why I said in my previews that they're gonna try to run the ball like crazy just so that you don't put too much on Trubisky's plate. They're rushing him ahead of when they wanted to start him. Their plan was to.
Why did they? What was if they beat the Steelers and were close in the other games? Why did they make that move?
Did you see the Packers game?
I heard about it.
He punted one on second down.
Oh God! Yeah, off his knee. That's right.
Yeah, he punted a passing play. It was really fun.
There were 4 turnovers against the Packers that were all on him. They have 10 turnovers on the season, which is tied for the worst in the league. So They're just saying this is just a cluster. I mean, they're better than their record shows, I think. Not much.
Yeah, they're not. I think last year's Bears were worse than this year's Bears. However, we do get Danny Trevathan is a huge loss.
That's true.
He was suspended because of his hit on, was it Devontae Adams in that Thursday night game?
Yeah.
So he'll be suspended for this one. Yeah. I think... Well, Leonard Floyd is going to wreak a lot of havoc. Leonard Floyd on the tackles will be a very interesting matchup to watch. And then they also have Willie Young, who used to be, I think he was a defensive end at some point. He's now right outside linebacker. They run a 3-4, so he'll probably have his hand in the dirt a lot. And he is somebody that Riley Reif, I remember watching his Detroit tape every time he went up against Willie Young, he was able to stymie really well. So this is, Riley Reif came from in the division. He knows these Bears just as well as the Vikings do, which is kind of fun.
Yeah.
And their secondary is, I don't know, nothing really about their secondary seems particularly inspiring. So I think this, for all intents and purposes, we should beat this team. This is a fine Bears team. We're a better team. We should go into their house and beat them. There's just so many weird things that can happen in Soldier Field that point to that not happening, which sucks. And I really want to break that curse.
Yeah, you gotta hope that Keenum will, if he plays, will be on the other end of the variance. But
yeah, I think the Lions game is what you saw from him. I think you kind of saw the actual limits of his abilities coming into play, and not much fluky stuff for him in the Lions game. He won't be the Bucs Case Keenum, and he won't be the Steelers Case Keenum. He'll be in the middle, which was the Lions game. I just hope, because sometimes he can have these 4 interception meltdowns, and I just hope that if he does play, we can get out of the last game without that happening.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be the worst thing to get out. What was our record with him? 1-2, I guess.
We'd be 2-2 with him. And if your backup quarterback came in and went 2-2 and won a divisional road game, that's just, as much as I've been hating on Case Keenum today, I still think he's probably one of the top 5 or 10 backups in the league.
Where do you rank Colin Kaepernick? Just kidding.
I know.
So I won last week then in predictions.
In predictions, yes, you missed Joe Johnson by 16. Oberly, you missed by 29. You guys both missed high on everything, and you are now tied at 67 apiece.
What?
Joe, you didn't win anything. You did better last week, or else then.
So I was the champion of week.
Oh my God! Okay, Spin Master,
best
go
ever.
Your prediction, Spin Master.
I've heard people saying it was the best prediction ever. It's like, calm down, everybody.
Nobody said
I'm
that.
just a human being. It was me.
FEMA thought it was the best prediction.
Isn't that true? So I think we made the rule last week that the person that won, being me, has to go first.
I think it's the person who's the head, but since you're tied, and we'll just say it's you, Johnson.
Yeah,
Joe,
so the most recent to win, big time.
Yeah.
My prediction's already on the line, Joe, so you're going second no matter what.
Yeah, I'm pretending like I didn't see it.
Yeah, right.
Scratch my patchy beard. God, these have been hard though. Just with all the uncertainty out there, not knowing
number one. Okay.
which quarterback's gonna play? I do feel like Keenum's gonna play, just because I don't think the Vikings are that lucky with Bradford, and I think perhaps bringing him back for the Packers game makes more sense if he's borderline and they're worried about chronic issues with his knee. But that having been said, I think I predicted that the Vikings would win every single time that I've done this.
Both of you have.
I'm going to stick with it, but
Jesus.
It's a division game, and I'm assuming Keenum's going to play, so I'm going to go 13-10 Vikings.
It's going to be a weird one.
Because, Latavius Murray's new forebath has that clanging of the uprights fresh in his mind. It's going to be a low-scoring affair, if you ask me.
Well, I can't wait to see Joe's vision of this game. 13-10. Yeehaw! Monday night.
Uh-oh.
Sounds like a good old-fashioned Monday night stinker.
Yeah, no kidding. I went 24-13 Vikings. I think they'll score some points against his defense. I think the Vikings defense is really good. Well, Joe's got him at 10, so he agrees at that point. But they'll get one lucky touchdown, and the Vikings will wake up, and the defense will latch down on them. And Bradford, I think, is gonna play. He's gonna start, and he's gonna throw the ball all over Soldier Field to his favorite receivers. And he's gonna find Michael Floyd for a couple. See it happening. Go ahead, Luke.
So last week, neither of my things came true. I predicted a win, which didn't come true, and I also predicted that the defensive backs would get more touchdowns than Kenny Golladay and Marvin Jones. Kenny Golladay was inactive, so that was a pretty out-of-touch prediction. But all the chances for a pick six got dropped. So I went 0 for 2 last time. I also want you guys to know that we have now predicted 5 games, and neither of you have predicted a Vikings loss yet. So that's what kind of podcast content that you all can expect, audience members.
Well, people say I'm such a negative fan, but I'm really not. I'm negative and optimistic at the same time.
What's your record? They're 2-2, so and they should have won last week. There's only one. I said I feared the Pittsburgh loss, but I said I'm picking them until they tell me I shouldn't.
And to be fair, we picked that before we knew Bradford wasn't going to play.
That's true.
So I don't think either of us would have picked Case Keenum going in there and laying down the law.
There are so many reasons with this game that the Vikings should win. The Vikings are a better team at a bunch of levels of the field. They're a better defensive team. They're going to be a better quarterbacked team. Maybe even if Case plays, because we don't know anything about Mitch Trubisky. There's a chance, Case Keenum was the better quarterback last week. Matt Stafford was a disaster. That doesn't mean Keenum was good, but both quarterbacks were really bad last week. And maybe that happens again.
The Vikings also have the better coach on Monday night, too. So
by a long shot, they have the better coach. They have the better defensive line. They have the better secondary. They have the better wide receiver core. There are just so many reasons the Vikings should win, and never in my whole life have I been so sure of an upset. And I'm going to say the Vikings lose because it just has to happen. There's too many curses at work here. So I'm going to say that the Vikings lose, and my bold prediction will be that Tariq Cohen leads the game in receiving yards.
Ooh.
Tariq Cohen, the running back, will lead the game in receiving yards, out
for both teams
and Thielen. Yes.
He's already done. Oh, for both teams. All right. Well, then I'll give you that because he's been the leading receiver for the Bears already.
Yep, and we're going to have, for some weird, unknown, stupid reason, Diggs and Thielen will both have off weeks. And it'll make no sense and mean nothing going forward, and we'll come away 2-3.
I'm going to bet that Luke's prediction is bupkis.
Ooh,
I'd be
strong language. Yeah, nothing surprises me anymore. I'm still waiting for, like I kind of joked about earlier, Diggs's injuries to start popping up too. So we'll see what happens, but
yeah, I think we need one Everson Griffin Achilles, or we're still due for one more good heartbreaker.
If we talk about it, it doesn't happen.
Joe, edit
That's
that.
Why I'm talking about it.
What's that?
I said if we talk about it, it doesn't happen, Joe.
Okay.
This is the knock on wood.
Yeah, I'm reverse jinxing here. Get with it.
Leave it in. I got you. All right.
We're the knock on wood podcast. But yeah, the second I start getting excited about the team and even the game on Monday, it sucks. It sucks for him. It's 2017, so it's not like the end of the world for him. But what a horrible way to.
Joe, this is the Viking fans' comfort zone to be totally down and expectations are all down, and now you get to go get jazzed on Monday night when the Vikings kick some tail.
Yeah, the misery loves company.
Perspective, baby. Perspective.
There it is. The OG dropping some perspective at the end of the show. With that, too, I did fail to mention Luke's new show at the beginning. So if you want to...
That Renegade podcast got plenty of time.
Guerrilla marketing.
Yeah, I plugged it.
Luke's on another podcast.
It's like Climbing the Pocket. Go look it up. We talk about math. We're nerds.
If you like math and you like football, like so many of us, check it out.
My girlfriend told me today that I took the jockiest thing in the world, which is football, and found a way to make it nerdy, and I've never felt so highly praised.
Oh, that's well done.
Yeah. Well, any other parting gems of wisdom?
Probably going to write about ACLs this week.
No way.
I'm going to do research, see,
if there's more of them than there used to be.
You can interview
Just talk
me.
about, are there ways to strengthen the ACL? Are there, what contributes to it?
I'm available for an interview since I had my ACL replaced. And I walked around for 3 years without one, so tough me.
That sounds awful.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll leave it on that. Want to thank everyone for tuning in and for following us on Facebook and the Twitter machine at purplePTSD, and follow VikingsTerritory.com, Vikings Territory on Facebook, Viking Territory on Twitter, because I think someone owns Vikings Territory, or I should probably figure that out if I own it. But check us out next week, and we will be back with more mirthful, pessimistic optimism, or depressed optimism.
Nice.
Thanks for listening. So I was talking to AJ, and this is not